Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back from the break. We hope you enjoyed it. My name is Tapfuma Makina.
And I'm Amy Lawon.
And we will be taking you through stream 2 of the concurrent sessions here in the Bill Gallagher Room. Our first session is going to focus on retirement matters. It's a topic which, as is human nature, I didn't care much about 5 or 6 years ago, but now I'm very, very invested in. And we will have our first presentation shortly.
Thanks, Tapfuma. Hi, everyone. Just to note that we'll be doing Q&A immediately following each of the talks. We will be giving preference to questions in the room. Those people that are joining us online are welcome to send their questions in via the app, and we will go to those questions if we have sufficient time. So our first topic is fairness in annuity pricing for the lower income earners, and that is brought to you by JOANNA COMBRINK and Dale Taylor. So thanks, ladies.
Hello, hi. I've never spoken into a microphone before in my life, so this is weird. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to our presentation. My name is Dale Taylor, and my colleague JOANNA and I will take you through our research on the fairness of annuity pricing for low-income earners in South Africa. Before we begin, we would just be interested to have a show of hands of any insurance or retirement actuaries that are in the room. We think this is important for you both.
Sharon.
Can you raise your hand so we can see? Thanks. Okay, so there's quite a few. Okay, good. Okay, so we'll start by setting the context to our presentation and why this topic is important. We'll look at the concept of fairness. We look at some mortality investigations. What impact does income have on mortality and the effect of anti-selection? We'll look at an overview of South Africa's life annuity market and the differences between institutional and retail pricing. And then we'll look at if life annuity market pricing is fair to low-income earners. What are other countries doing? And then we'll go through a conclusion and then improving the fairness of the broader system. So to set the context, in South Africa, we currently have a system where private pension savings are voluntary and accessed either through occupational retirement funds or through retail retirement annuities. Participation is voluntary and preservation is voluntary. Currently, the annuitization rules are provident funds used to be able to take 100% in cash at retirement. That's now changed, where annuitization is compulsory. Pension funds, you can take 1/3 of the benefit in cash at retirement. The rest must be used to purchase an annuity, so annuitization is compulsory. You can annuitize through either a life or a living annuity. Just a very brief summary of how they work. A life annuity is basically a pension income for life, which is insured by an insurer. A living annuity is actually really just like an investment savings account. From around 10 years ago, government embarked on quite a substantial level of retirement reform. The first change that's really significant was the one around provident funds, where annuitization became compulsory. And then we're moving to the so-called two-pot system, which is planned for next year, in which preservation becomes compulsory and annuitization is compulsory. And they are also proposing auto-enrollment, which means participation becomes compulsory. There are far-reaching implications for these changes for the industry, including the annuity market. This includes more individuals annuitizing at retirement, a more diverse pool of individuals annuitizing at retirement, with potentially bigger retirement pots because you are forcing preservation, and a move towards a compulsory system with no opt-out. So the annuity market at a glance is split between life annuities and living annuities. Within life annuities, we split the market between the retail market and the institutional market. The retail market is where individuals are purchasing an annuity for themselves directly from insurers, typically through an advisor. And the institutional market, which is also known as the group market or corporate market, is essentially where annuities are purchased in bulk, typically through a default annuity strategy set by pension funds, or where a pension fund closes and their book of pensioners is transferred to an insurer. Life or living annuity can be used for annuitization, but currently around 90% of annuities that are sold are living annuities. This is a problem. Living annuities were originally designed for flexibility as top-up products and not as products for the majority of people to be using as income security, and particularly not for the low-income sector to be using for income security. There are a number of issues with these products being used in this way. Importantly, risks are transferred to the individual. That includes longevity and investment risks. The question is, can individuals manage such risks themselves? They need ongoing advice around drawdown rates and investment selection. The costs are higher, particularly commission fees are a lot higher on living annuities. Therefore, there's a perverse incentive for these to be sold over life annuities. The purpose of our research was to explore the statement that was made by National Treasury, which is that the life annuity market does not present good value for low-income earners. The question is life annuity pricing in the retail market fair? And specifically, should there be price differentiation on income in the retail market, as there is in the institutional annuity market? Our research aims to answer this question, and so we'll take you through how we went about this. So why should we care about annuity pricing fairness? Well, fairness is always important, but when it comes to a system in which you can't opt out, it becomes critical. We have already moved to mandatory annuitization. The introduction of two pots will bring about compulsory preservation, compulsory annuitization, and planned compulsory participation. If you are forcing people to save and forcing them to preserve and then forcing them to annuitize, then the products available for annuitization need to be appropriate and fairly priced, especially for those most vulnerable. To set the scene, what does fair mean? The Oxford Dictionary defines fair as impartial and just treatment or behavior without favoritism or discrimination. The Collins Dictionary adds the quality of being reasonable, right, and just. The concept of fairness in annuity pricing, we can look at two methods of annuity and insurance pricing: cross-subsidization and homogeneous pricing. In cross-subsidization, the premium reflects the average risk of the pool. This is fair because everyone pays the average price. It's not fair if the sharing of risk or subsidization goes in the wrong direction. So cross-subsidization is fair when the healthy subsidize the sick, the young subsidize the old, the rich subsidize the poor. So really where less vulnerable subsidizes more vulnerable. In homogeneous pricing, the premium reflects specific individual risk. This is fair because everyone pays for their own risk, but it's not fair if it means that people with higher risk can't access protection. Our definition of fairness, we've used the following criteria to test whether annuity market pricing can be considered to be fair. The price of an annuity must be reasonable relative to the expected benefit, unless a cross-subsidy is intended. treat all people equitably and essentially similar situations similarly and with consistency. Make decisions on appropriate criteria without undue favoritism or improper prejudice. Promptly and voluntarily correct mistakes and improprieties. Don't take advantage of others' mistakes or ignorance. Fully consider the rights, interests, and perspectives of all stakeholders. To prepare for our research, we looked at a number of different mortality investigations. These were the main ones that we looked at. To look at the impacts of income on mortality, we mostly used the 2017 CSI report. This separated male and female mortality across income bands of less than 10,000 to 30,000, 30,000 per month, so that's income. Unsurprisingly, lower income individuals have higher mortality. That's what we expect, and that's what most of the research suggests. We used the mortality table to determine annuity rates with consistent parameters and only changing the income. The mortality differences between low income and high income translates into higher income earners, translates into annuities for higher income individuals being 20 to 30% more expensive than lower income individuals, based on the fact that higher income individuals have a longer mortality, so they're expected to live longer. We also needed to look at the expected impact of anti-selection on annuity pricing. So this is a tricky one because there isn't really any specific research on this, and it's quite hard to quantify. Anti-selection in context means that higher risk people are more likely to take out insurance for protection. So voluntary annuities are expected to be more expensive because in a voluntary market, those who know that they will die sooner are more likely to purchase a living annuity or take their benefits in cash than those who think they'll live longer and want to take a life annuity. So what we did was we compared the mortality of forced annuitants, essentially through retirement funds, to voluntary annuitants in the open market. It's not an exact quantification, but this is the best that we could do to get some guesstimate of what the effect of anti-selection is on the pricing difference. From comparing these two studies, we think anti-selection in the voluntary market can count for around 10% of a difference in pricing. Just a note on mortality improvements. So the study of mortality improvements in South Africa shows that mortality improvements in South Africa are in fact slowing, and there have been similar findings overseas, both in terms of the impacts of income on mortality as well as mortality improvements are slowing over time. Just a very basic description of annuity pricing methodology. So life annuity prices are based on the expected present value of future benefits plus expected value of costs and expenses. There's a loading for regulatory and shareholder capital requirements, and there's a loading for risk and profit margins. The mortality assumption is the key assumption, and that's the subject of our research. So through our discussions with insurers, we learned that mortality used in retail and institutional annuity pricing is different. There are a few reasons for this. The insurers tend to use separate risk pools for their retail annuity business and their institutional annuity business, often within the same insurer, so there's a different pricing basis across the two. Anti-selection in the retail market, as discussed, may result in higher prices. And income rating. Now, this income rating is the key issue. In the retail annuity market, mortality is rated only by age and sex. In the institutional annuity market, mortality is rated by age, sex, and income for most insurers. There are a few other reasons that life annuity prices differ between retail and institutional markets. Fees and expenses may be different. The discount rate may be different based on different ways of managing the asset pool backing the annuities. Regulatory costs and profit loadings may differ, and competitive pressure. Retail annuity prices are publicly available of all the insurers, or most of the insurers, but not in the institutional market. So insurers tend to be more competitive on the institutional annuity pricing than on the retail annuity pricing. So we know there's a difference, and there are many reasons for that, but how big is this difference, and is it fair? At this point, I'll hand over to JOANNA to continue. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So it's very exciting to stand here because we've spent quite a lot of time on this, and the insurers, and we'd like to thank them very much for cooperating and giving us a lot of information. And I think a lot of this information, when we spoke to them, they hadn't seen, because the industry, we're not very good at sharing a lot of our information that we think is IP. So we've tried to protect the data sources quite well. We've anonymized the insurers. We've swapped them around in the different graphs so that you can't pick out who the company is. We did conduct interviews with the different insurers. So we approached Old Mutual, Sanlam, Momentum, Metropolitan, Liberty, and Just Retirement. We think that that represents a big portion of the annuity market. It has been pointed out we should have probably included Discovery as well, but maybe for the next round of results. Now, it's important to say that the point of this exercise was not to point fingers or do a witch hunt or do anything of that nature. It was just to understand what the market is doing, understand why, and see if there's a reason to possibly do things differently or better, if things can be improved. So hopefully, please take it in the spirit in which it was intended. First, I'm going to kick off with a little bit of market stats, so just generally what the retail market looks like. So first, we looked at the market share. So this is based on the number of policies for the different types of annuities across the different insurers, just to see if there's like any massive differences. And you can see the market's really dominated by largely two insurers, with a slight dip on the fixed increase annuities on the green insurer. But nothing very surprising there, I think. The next thing we looked at was the split of the policies in force by income, because we wanted to see how much of the general annuities are like low income, high income, like what it looks like. And this one was surprising to us because like all the policies are in the less than 2,500 Rand a month category of a level annuity. So whereas we'd thought always kind of anecdotally that low-income people don't take annuities because they take cash. So this is quite surprising. However, we don't know the source of those tiny level annuities. So I mean, if you've had a living annuity, a life annuity for the last 20 years, and it's a level annuity, of course, it's you know, it could have meant something then, but now it's not. Someone also made the comment that it's possible that as people run out of money in their living annuity, they now flock to a life annuity and try to get some security. So that would be quite interesting to understand where those policies are coming from. So this one was surprising. And this pattern is the same across every insurer. So it's not like one insurer is dominating the market here with tiny annuities. It's exactly the same pattern for each insurer. The next one that we looked at was the composition of the annuities between the insurers, between the different types of annuities, so level, fixed, escalation, and CPI-linked annuities. So like 90% of the annuities that are written are level annuities, with another 8% or so that are fixed increase annuities, mostly about 5%, we were told, and a tiny proportion of CPI-linked annuities. So the fixed increase annuity versus CPI-linked, you can get quite a lot of inflationary protection depending on with a fixed increase annuity. So it's not saying that you have to get a CPI link. They're quite expensive. And if you think inflation is going to be ballpark your fixed increase, then you're all right there. But huge amounts of level annuities. The other thing we wanted to have a look at is to see how the new sales of life annuities had changed, or if they had changed over time. What we were really wanting to see is that 90% living annuity versus life annuity split, and to see if that had changed over time, but those stats aren't available. So we just have the life annuity portion for those insurers. And you see that from 2018 to 2021, we started this in 2022, so that's why it only goes up to 2021. This number of policies, new policies, so these are new policies sold, had more than doubled, which is quite encouraging. And in the graph on the right, you can see that over that same period of time, the proportion of level annuities had decreased, and the proportion of fixed escalation annuities had increased. So suggesting that people are looking a little bit more for inflation protection, possibly over that time, possibly COVID scares, possibly also the changes in yield curves over that time, which would have made those annuities a little bit cheaper. And then we wanted to see, okay, out of the new annuity sales, what proportion of those are, the low income kind of category, just because we wanted to make sure that that crazy graph at the beginning with all those level annuities wasn't old level annuities. And in fact, it doesn't seem to be the case. So this graph shows you across from 2018 to 2021 are the different colored bars. And the little kind of groupings are the purchase price of the annuity. So you see that the biggest number of the new policies across all the years are in the under 500,000 Rand category. Again, surprising, especially given the de minimis amount and just anecdotal what we thought we knew. The same thing is just shown differently here in case you're looking at want to aggregate the percentages, which is a little bit easier. So here up to the kind of mustardy colored bar, let me see if I can use this pointer. So up to there, you're looking at about 80% of new life annuity sales coming from purchase amounts of less than 1 million Rand, which is like hugely significant. So the lower income sector is really quite basic, like buying a lot of these policies. Or people are just splitting them up and buying a lot of 1 million Rand policies instead of one 4 million Rand policy. I'm not sure why, because there would be no advantage to them from doing that at the moment. Cool, hey? Nice information. I think it's cool. Okay, now the next section we're going to talk about is the pricing. So we now know what the market looks like, and now we're going to look at what the actual prices are. So I just wanted to recap why we're doing this. We just want to check that if the market is fair, specifically with income ratings. So obviously we're going to look at lower income, higher income, how are they priced, the retail pricing, which as Dale said does not use income, versus institutional, which does use income, and what that looks like. I've put the definition of fairness, so we're looking at, is the pricing reasonable for the expected level of benefit that is expected to be delivered by that annuity. We want all people to be treated equitably, and then of course we want the insurers to act in a fair, impartial, blah, 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 all those ways. It is important to say that depending on the definition of fairness that you use in this, you will come up with a different result. So we've used this based on a paper that we found that talked actually about hiring practices, but we thought it was quite a nice definition to use. And then what do we think we know is that we're expecting for higher income individuals to pay more, so to have higher annuity rates than low income individuals, about 20 to 30%, as Dale mentioned, based on those mortality tables that we used. And we're also expecting that anti-year selection, so the difference in institutional and retail pricing, could account for maybe 10% of the price difference. So now let's see what actually is happening in practice. So firstly, the measure that we use to compare the pricing is the annuity rate, and it became apparent to me in chatting to some of the insurers that there's different ways that this term is used. So we are using it, when I say annuity rate, it means the price, so the purchase price of a pension that starts off at R1. So that's the capital purchase amount. So in the retail market, so where individuals enter it usually through a financial advisor, so this is most people that would retire. Like people that retire can't access institutional pricing. So this is basically everyone. That there's no difference in price of the annuity by income. So the high income person will pay the same as the low income person, except one insurer that does this. There's also what we found very little price variation between the pricing of insurers. So everyone prices within 5% of each other. The difference between the highest and the lowest price for the same annuity is within 5%. If we exclude one insurer that was quite a lot more expensive than the rest. But very little price variation. And then we've just shown the average then annuity rate because all the pricing is quite similar. So we've taken an average to use as the average retail price in the rest of the slides when we compare against institutional pricing. And you see there the price for R1 pension is 8.3 Rand for a level annuity, 11.7 Rand for a 5% fixed increase annuity, and 13.4 Rand for a CPI guaranteed increase annuity. Obviously, this was at a point in time, given, I think it was January 2022, using the yields at that time and the pricing bases at that time. So now we know what the insurers who don't rate by income are doing and what things look like. So now we thought, okay, let's see how that looks and compare that average rate to if you do use income in the retail market to see what the difference would be. So this is the pricing of the insurers that don't use income as a rating. So that's those annuity rates that I just mentioned. And here is the annuity rate of the insurer that does use income for a low-income person. So we looked at this and we thought, whoa, but there's no difference. This is crazy. Like, what's going on here? Are the insurers? So the one possible explanation was that the insurers are actually in effect pricing in implicitly low-income mortality because most of their book is low income. But then we were told that actually you do weight it by the size of the annuity, so actually not quite sure about that. Obviously, some questions were raised in our minds. We then had a conversation with the insurer, and we did get these other 2 points, which actually make a lot more sense. So the grey bar is if you take income and health into account. So you rate them, the individual by health and income. And there, one can be skeptical, but actually you can't really separate income from health in a lot of instances. It's not like you could, they're so similarly linked that if you take out the effect of ill health, then what you're left with on the other side is like a super healthy low income person, which isn't really like the average low income person. So we are quite happy to say that we agree that the grey bars are more representative of a low income population in general. Which do show a lower annuity rate across all the different annuity types than the average retail price, which we would expect because those individuals live shorter. So if you're going to rate by income, then yes, you will give them, it will be cheaper. And the higher income, you can see the green bars are significantly higher than the grey bars because they're high income, they will live longer, so they must pay more. So in the difference between the low income and the high income in the retail sector for the insurer that does price by income, you do see that 20 to 30% gap that we thought we were going to, or we were hoping to see, based on the mortality investigations that we had conducted. So far so good. Then we looked at the institutional market. So the different bars are the different insurers, and we've shown the annuity rate for each insurer for a level annuity, fixed increase annuity, and a CPI-linked annuity. So you see there the little percentages show the price variation between the lowest annuity rate and the highest annuity rate. So you see that the spread in pricing here on the institutional side is significantly bigger than the 5% that we saw in the retail market. So that was an interesting observation. So this is based on, because they rate by income, we have to do it separately to see if it's the same across the board. So this is for the lowest pension amount or purchase amount. Similar story in the high purchase amount. So the kind of high income annuity pricing also has a similar degree of variability in the pricing between the highest income and the lowest income. And then the yellow bar, I've basically added to the previous two graphs, and the yellow bar is the retail, so the average retail price. So any normal person retiring will get this price, okay? So this is showing the institutional low-income annuity rates against the retail rates. So basically, you're showing here the yellow bar, what would a person retiring pay for their annuity? And to the left of that, if that same person was part of an outsourcing exercise and accessed the institutional market, what would the different insurers charge? So here you can see that in general, it's not that clear on the level annuity perhaps, but if you average it out, it is that in the retail market, so this slide is for the low income individual, the retail market individual ends up paying more than they would in any of the institutional market pricing for a low-income person. The difference is, on average, I think 9 to 20%, depending on the annuities, between 9 to 20% more. We don't think that all of that can be explained by anti-selection. The biggest price difference, so retail versus the lowest kind of annuity rate. So if you had to hunt around, the biggest difference is about 20 to 40%. So that's quite significant. A significant difference between the two pricing bases. And remember that the person can't access this institutional pricing. So that's only available to groups where it seems to be a little bit more of a competitive market. And then on the flip side, of course, for a high-income person, you see that actually a high-income person that's accessing a pension from the retail market is paying less than what they would pay in the institutional market, because they are rated by income. So actually they're scoring here by not being rated by income. They end up paying around 7% less than they would on an average institutional pricing basis. This table shows basically the percentages there are the difference, the pricing spread in the institutional market pricing. So it's for each insurer, for each type of annuity, the difference between the highest income and the lowest income rate. Okay, so for insurer one, let me see if I can point. Here, insurer one here for level annuity, their highest income pays 17% higher than the lowest income. So that's kind of what that is showing. For a CPI-linked annuity for this insurer, the highest income is paying about 30% more than the lowest income. So that kind of falls into our expected kind of 20 to 30% range for these two insurers. Insurer 4 didn't provide a lot of data, so I'm not going to make any inferences about that. Insurer 3 and 5, so there's a issue on the institutional pricing because of expenses, and the way that you load expenses has quite a big difference, makes quite a big difference on the actual rates that you get. So I'm not sure if that's an expense issue or some other issue. We've gone with it's an expense issue, and so since these results, since these results are kind of what we're seeing by the mortality tables, they kind of support, they make more sense in terms of what is happening in the market. And then in this table, we've looked at how big is the difference for each insurer between their own retail rate and their own institutional rate for a low-income person. So again, for those two insurers, where we don't think that the expenses are making a difference, we see that that's quite large. So a low-income person in this insurer will pay 31% more just by retiring normally than they would if they went to that same insurer and were part of an outsourcing. So that's quite large. The main explanation that was given by the insurers is that of anti-selection. It seems quite large, even with anti-selection. So there could be the other factors that Dale mentioned, like expenses, etc., etc. But it's just a really large difference. That I think we're noting that it's really quite big. So in summary, in the retail market, there's very little variation in annuity rates, around 5% between all the insurers, and pricing data is publicly available. There's no income rating except for the one insurer, and that insurer that does use income rating does produce the 20 to 30% difference between high income and low income annuity rates. In the institutional market, you have large variation in the annuity rates between the insurers. Is about 20 to 25% for the lower income individuals. That pricing data is not publicly available, so a bit of different competition. I've put the income rating differentiation in this presentation because I thought it would be, when we started, we didn't know where those kind of cut-off income brackets were. So it looks like they, and this is rough, is around 5,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand or 20,000 Rand per month. It seems like above 20,000 Rand, there's very little difference if you earn 20,000 Rand or 100,000 Rand in terms of the mortality or the annuity rate that is provided. And then if you look at purchase amounts, those cut-offs sit at about 250, 500, 2.5 million and 5 million Rand. Above 5 million Rand makes very little difference. And then again, on the institutional market, within each insurer, rating by income does produce, again, the kind of 20 to 30% income differential in the annuity rates, which is what we would have expected. And then, of course, the last point that I mentioned is that large discrepancy between the institutional pricing and the retail pricing for a low-income individual within the same insurer, which is quite high, and we don't think is explained by anti-selection. So why isn't income rating used in retail life annuity pricing? I mean, it seems like it would be good to use it. So we've asked the insurers this question, and the responses that were given are that in a high interest environment, the mortality that you use doesn't make a huge difference because you're discounting by such a large amount. The lack of income-specific mortality data in the retail market, so it's not something that's captured on the systems now, so purchase amounts or income. So it's difficult to kind of back test the data and look at mortality previously and split it up with information that you don't have. I think, though, that there are ways and means of dealing with that from the conversations with insurers, based on postal codes and all sorts of other fancy things that some of them mentioned. The point was also made that if this was something that was forced, it would add uncertainty in the market or to them, and additional risk, and so they would price for it, and so any kind of benefit that you would get from income rating would be offset by the margins that are put on it, because then, there's a bit of nervousness. One insurer said that the retail market may already reflect a level of mortality applicable to the low-income sector because most of the policies are in the low-income sector, so that's fair. But from a fairness perspective, it still means that your high-income individuals are like getting a free ride on this nice, cheap product, which they appear not to be using. And then there was a comment made that the market for retail life annuities is very small, so relative to living annuities, and it's not really worthwhile doing making changes to the pricing methodologies and all the things that would need to happen in the distribution chain to get the right information across and make sure that there wasn't any cheating involved. And while that may be the case at the moment, given the move towards compulsory annuitization and everything that Dale talked about, we are expecting that there will be quite a big change in the number and the size of the annuity pools. Of course, the fact that you can annuitize using a living annuity, does have an impact on that. So, the question. Now I'm going to take everything that we've learned. So we decided to set up that definition up front before we even looked at the results, because it's quite an emotive topic and people get very excited. And so we thought if we should have like a clear definition first, and then we can look at that definition afterwards and see how it correlates. So if we looked at the first criteria, whether the price of an annuity is reasonable relative to the expected benefit, we know that income affects mortality. We know, we can see what the difference is. It's about 20 to 30%. And so it means that the lack of income rating does not reflect the expected benefit to be paid, which advantages the high income individual over the low income individual here. So we're going to have to say that it appears that this criteria is not met from the pricing that we are seeing in the market. The second criterion was that the system should treat and price essentially similar situations similarly and with consistency. So here, you use income in the pricing of life insurance, but the same insurer will not use it in the pricing of life annuities. So that's, that's not consistent. And you do use income as a rating in the institutional market, but it's not used in the retail market. So that's, again, not very consistent. And so it appears that this criteria is, again, not met. And the third criteria, which I've lumped all the rest into it, is that the annuity provider should make all the decisions on appropriate criteria without undue favoritism, improper prejudice. And no one's saying that people are going out of their way to be screwing the low-income earners, for lack of a better word. No one is saying that at all, but there are different practices that are being applied, even though there's knowledge of this existing. And it doesn't seem like the reasons that have been given for not applying an income rating are insurmountable. So we think that this test fails a little bit as well. And I think the point that I was trying to make is that the way that things are being priced is totally justifiable. That's hence the point I was making. It's very justifiable. It's the way that things have been done. There's not perhaps that amount of information. They're technically sound. It's not a case of someone trying on purpose to do something devious. But just because things have been done like that in the past, given the landscape changes, doesn't mean that we have to continue to do it the same way in the future. And the question is, can we find a way to do things better? Can we find a way to actually give weight to the fact that those lower income individuals are actually going to live a shorter amount of time than the higher income individual, so that we achieve a more fair and consistent outcome in the pricing. So I think what we saw was that even if you have all the best reasons why this is happening, when you look at it, it just doesn't look like something that maybe we want to see in the system. So is there a way that we can do it differently? Part of the question was also around regulatory. Is there any regulatory intervention that the regulators could take to help with the situation? So based on our conversations with the insurers, things like reinsurance are super expensive. If the government has to guarantee things, we don't really have the money for that. And they don't also have the knowledge to price that, so you'd rather go to a reinsurer, but that is going to be super expensive. In the other countries, we've looked at 59 countries. Thank you to WTW Global Benefits people for providing us information around those. So most retirement systems of the countries that we looked at rely on state or nationalized benefit systems. Where there are private markets, most of them don't have mandatory annuitization. So I think we only found 2 where you have to annuitize at retirement, or a portion at retirement. Lump sum benefits are common and by far the most popular option. And countries have also moved to almost greater flexibility at annuitization. So instead of forcing more annuitization, they've gone, you know what, do what you want, run out of money, we don't care. There seems to be much less focus on the decumulation. I'm not suggesting that they don't care. Apologies, I take that back. I'm sure they have their reasons. There's across the board a lot of focus on regulation in the accumulation phase, so while you're saving. So there will be things like minimum contributions or quite stringent rules around how you communicate and things that you can invest in, etc. But at the point of annuitization, it's almost like no one knows what to do, so they just don't say anything. So there's a lot of regulatory protection while you're saving, but at the point that you actually have to convert it into an income, there's very little regulation there. We couldn't find any useful or comparable regulation around actual annuity pricing. No one tells the insurers how to price or what rating factors to use. And generally, when we looked at it, there's generally no good example of an entirely successful retirement system generally anywhere. So there are bits and pieces that look like you would want them in your retirement system, but generally as a whole, it doesn't seem to us like any country has quite got this one bedded down. Again, here in terms of pricing, pricing by income in, Sweden is probably not as important as pricing by income in South Africa, just because of the level of the income disparity that we have. So in conclusion, we're moving from a world of voluntary participation into kind of compulsory everything, even though if it doesn't all come out. But there is changes being made in this direction. Based on the given criteria of fairness that we've applied, the retail annuity market doesn't seem to be fair to the lower income market, because you're not pricing for income. And also income rating is not consistently used in the market. We also don't think that the reasons offered are insurmountable. We think they're valid for the past, so that's fine. But going forward, I think that there's a way that we can do this. And we haven't found any evidence of pricing regulations in international markets. And given that the pool of individuals and all the parts should increase in future, I think it's important that we think about these annuities a little bit differently. We've also looked, when you're looking at this, I still have like 5 minutes, when you look at fairness, this is only looking at pricing fairness of income rating in this market. So, we had quite a lot of very exciting discussions between ourselves and other people, and we looked at the kind of fairness of the system as a whole, which I think if you're looking at changing something, you do need to look at the system as a whole and just see what would make sense. So this is, if government is looking at more of a compulsory, moving to nationalized, that kind of system, how would this look and what would we do? So there's a number of things that we thought were unfair. So this is our opinion. The one is this whole risk transfer, DB to DC. DB fund, you had trustee boards, they had advisors, they spent gazillions of rands getting advice and managing the risk of these individuals. And suddenly, you're expecting individuals to do this by themselves. With as much as the funds try to communicate, it's a very complex system. And the management of it, we're all subject to behavioral biases, and it's just doubtful whether individuals can actually manage these risks on their own. And there's a lack of regulatory restrictions at annuitization. And if you're going into a system where the aim is presumably to create a saving system that we create income security in retirement so that you're not reliant on the state, then actually that should come with some sort of boundaries, potentially. So, I've accepted something out of our paper here, just that encapsulate that, we're transferring risk to individuals without appropriate regulatory restrictions in place is not fair, where the results of the inappropriate decisions are so critical and so huge and have such significant implications for those involved. And when you know that people don't make the right decisions for their own selves, like we know that it's been proven in other markets, and we all like instant gratification rather than delayed gratification. The product complexity and appropriateness, I mean, there's a number of products. So the one that Dale mentioned was the living annuity. I mean, that, you know, as a top-up product, super flexible, need lots of advice, fine. When you have lots of money, go do that. When you don't and you're trying to create income security, it is not an appropriate product. It was never intended to be that. So why are we using it in that place? You know, and then trying to make it fit through various ways that you could potentially achieve. And it's in our view, it's not fit for purpose. One could argue the same for with-profits annuities, potentially. You know, I think that the original intention of those were to where you had bulk pension fund purchasers who wanted to outsource their pensions. You had to meet that inflation target promise, and so you had that kind of thing in place, but those are really complex products. You know, you can't just look at a price the way that some of the increases already baked into the price. It's very, very complex to understand. And so is it appropriate that those, which we believe now are being sold in the retail space, is that something that's going to be understood? Can we expect that is understood? I'm not quite sure. Then because you've got this information asymmetry where the individuals making these choices really don't know very well, and the products are super complex to manage, it forces the need for costly advice. So is that really appropriate in a kind of compulsory environment? Do you need all this product complexity for achieving income security? The commission structure can create conflicts of interest, we know that. And then the market segmentation that we see with the different rules, the life versus living annuity, the split in the retail institutional markets, non-collation of information, the different regulatory restrictions that apply on different types of funds, it all adds to the complexity of the system. I mean, we just were asking whether we shouldn't start to see retirement income as a social good and as an actual, quite a thing that we actually need rather than a financial product for those that wish to have one. And should there not be a little bit more regulation around the annuitization phase? What products are available? For example, living annuities are quite regulated in the default in-fund option, but those same restrictions don't apply for an out-of-fund or non-default option, or even an in-fund non-default option. Is that something that we want? So far, whatever we're doing has had undesirable incomes. People aren't saving, people aren't preserving, and people are not making necessarily the right choices for themselves in retirement with the high levels of living annuities that are taken up. So we've looked at how we can improve the system. So firstly, you can tell that we don't think that a living annuity is necessarily a great product for achieving income security. So how can you manage that without overhauling the system? And that would be through kind of incentive measures to make it less attractive, through tax or commission structures or various other things. We're not sure if that will be strong enough, and you'll still have that anti-selection effect. So for a compulsory market, and this is off the topic of fairness of pricing, we thought, should the system not rather have a restriction and say, okay, well, take your first X amount and purchase a life annuity with some inflation protection in it. And then if you have money above that, then you can do whatever you want. That bit that's protected then can be subject to possibly pricing regulations, or there can be some communal price that is set, almost like in the medical schemes world, where you can price by income, but regardless of the insurer you go to, you get the same rate. Obviously, that would have to go with a risk transfer mechanism for the insurers that happen to get the worst pools. But that seems to be a better way to achieve income security than this free-for-all regulatory kind of gap that currently exists. So we got quite excited about this one, and we would very much to hear your thoughts around what we've said, or if you have any ideas. So we're painting a little bit of blue sky here, of how the system or the retirement system can be improved.
Few minutes for questions. If there are questions from anyone in the room, we've got one of our event assistants, Happy, is here somewhere. He'll grab a mic and he'll bring it to you. So if you have any questions for Joanna or Dale, please put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you so you can address them.
One on this side of the room.
So, Happy?
Hi, thanks for a great presentation, really interesting topic. So I wanted to check, in your view, how can insurers as well participate in ensuring that the annuitization stage is fair for all? Because even though regulation might need to be implemented by regulators and so on, how can the insurers ensure fairness in their practices as well? Thank you.
Look, so I think that the insurers will need to answer that one. In some of the conversations that we've had with them, they all felt that this is quite an important conversation to be having, and they indicated that they were looking at this topic. So I don't know if anyone from the insurers wants to comment on that. No? No takers. But it's a difficult one, I think. I'm not sure if the insurers would voluntarily do anything about it, or if it requires regulatory input. But I think the purpose is to open that conversation. Like, are we, just because we've been doing things a certain way, should we continue to do them? Should we change them? Let's look at it. What can we do? And speaking about it, I think, would be helpful. Because also for them, I understand you don't want to be the first guy that does it, because then you upset your risk pool, and then you're upsetting everybody else's risk pools, and it's all very precarious.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for that. A couple of points. First one, the issue of, I don't think I saw anything there about disclosure. The kind of disclosure that you could insist on as a regulator, for example, is to show those slides about relatively how much people on the lower end are paying relative to, let's say, institutional or higher end within the same insurer. So that could be one thing which shows whether the subsidization is right or not. The second one is to do with, unfortunately, the real big problem with retirement savings is people just don't save enough. So yes, we could try and insist that that is a fair amount, but it's such a tiny proportion already of the income that they need, that really we want to make sure people save enough. But I certainly think that we should take this much further. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
We had one more question on this side of the room.
Hi, thanks very much for an excellent presentation. I love how excited you are about the data, but it really was good. In the context of what you presented, you mentioned that you don't think that living annuities are appropriate for income protection or for social protection. But considering the unfairness of the pricing in that low income range, and also considering how low the pensions are, so the bulk of those annuities are below 2,500 rand. If you then consider the state pension, which is around 2,000 rand a month, so if you combine that, you've got a total pension where about half of that is guaranteed by the state pension. So if you've got that where you've got half of your income guaranteed, then can it possibly make sense that the balance is in a living annuity where you're not exposed to the unfair pricing, and you can then possibly take a bit more risk on that as well. So yes, on its own, it may not be fair, but if you combine the state pension and a living annuity, is it possibly much better than unfair life annuity pricing?
Yeah, so I can't answer that offhand. I still think that the risk, I mean, look, the state pension is what, like 1,600 and 2,000 and 80 rand per month. So it's not a very large number. And I think that to rely on that to be your kind of income security is quite low. So I'm not sure what the right number is. I mean, that's a different conversation. You know, what is the right number to kind of put that, like, that one would need for income security before we're all happy, or whoever needs to be happy is happy, that is handled before you kind of get to play. I think our main concern is the level of understanding of the management that is required in a living annuity to manage it properly. So in other words, not to go for the 17.5% drawdown, to actually limit yourself to the 4.5%, to understand that if markets run, maybe you need to lower that drawdown so that you can bank that extra bit. Where are you going to invest this money? These are not simple choices. And so the requirement for the advice makes it inappropriate for a lower income person, because you're spending a lot of the money on the advice that is necessary for the living annuity. Does that make sense? I can't give you an exact number here because we haven't quantified like a well-managed living annuity versus a low-income pricing from the retail market, for example, or the retail market pricing. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I have to echo what he said. Your excitement for the data really just shone through. So thank you very much. So thank you very much to Joanna and to Dale. Please give them a round of applause. Before we start our next session, just want to welcome everybody who's just walked into Bill Gallagher Stream 2. Right now, we are focusing our sessions on retirement matters. And our next session is titled Evolving Social Security in South Africa, an Actuarial Perspective. Our presenters for this are Megan Carswell, Andrea Bzednot, and Stephen Walker. And also just to mention another contributor who couldn't make it today because she's involved in another event in Cape Town, Natalie van Zyl. But I'll leave it to the three that are here to take it away.
Perhaps just before we go ahead, for those online, we are aware of the technical issues, and these presentations are being recorded and will be available on the app within 24 hours.
Brilliant.